Welcome, everybody. This is going to be a new show that I'm going to put out a couple times a week. As everybody may know me at Charles Chill, FFB, Dynasty and Chill, hashtag Dynasty Leverage. That's what you'll see if you see me posting on Twitter. And I have the privilege to be able to do these weekly videos for Dynasty Pandemic, dynastypandemic.com. Check out the app. We do the Dynasty Trades in Five, myself, Shane Manila, and Clay Mosley, the creator and inventor of Dynasty Pandemic. So check that out. It's a cool app. Tons coming with that app and content coming forward, especially in this off season and into next season. But I'm going to do my own series on the channel. They're going to be just quick hit videos, 5 to 15 minutes long. And a lot of it's going to be focused on dynasty leverage. I love to talk about this stuff, but we can't really get too much into it when we're doing the dynasty trades in fives videos. And even on like Mannequin Chill, I do Mannequin Chill with Shane on YouTube and my own podcast. Sometimes I really want to go into the weeds on things that I'm on the ground floor doing. And it's just really hard to put it out there when you're talking players and you're trying to appeal, to a mainstream audience, basically. And so this is a lot of what you get on our Patreon channel, my Patreon channel at Dynasty Chill. It's patreon.com/dynasty and chill. You get a lot of my theory and a lot of my leverage and strategy moves. So I'm going to talk about that and try to do it in these quick hit videos on this channel. So we're going to start Dynasty leverage. The first topic I wanted to bring up, it's week 10 of the Dynasty season. And you're starting to see the contenders and the pretenders separate themselves in your given leagues. Now, there's still probably quite a few teams that may be on the fence. But what I like to do is this. I like to go through and look at where all my teams stand from a record perspective. That's the first thing. Most leagues are head to head. What's my record? But then you have to look a little bit deeper. You have to look at how do you determine who gets into the playoffs? I have quite a few leagues where there's only 5 teams that get in the playoffs, or maybe there's 6 teams that get in the playoffs, but a couple teams may get in on points. A couple teams may get in on all play record. There's different ways where you can get in the playoffs. Make sure you know that. Make sure you know what you're chasing the rest of the season. Because you may have a team that looks like they're doing well, but then you realize, well, the 5 and the 6 seed are based on points. So even though I'm sitting in the 5th slot right now, I'm 8th in points or something like that. You want to make sure you know what you're chasing. That's the first thing. The second thing is also understand what determines the draft picks. If you're going to choose to go the other way, what determines your draft picks? Is it potential points? Is it record? Is there any benefit to making moves to potentially help your draft pick by moving down in the potential points or moving down in the standings? One trick, and I know people hate this, but it's come up in a couple of leagues that I'm in. If you have a taxi squad, if you have rookies that are on your current roster, if you can demote them during the season, demote them to the taxi squad. That doesn't count towards your potential points. I'm in a couple of leagues where draft picks are based on potential points. So there really is no reason, if I'm not contending, to have rookies that are scoring points on my roster. Another trick, it depends on your bylaws and your rules with tanking and setting a full lineup. I'm not advocating don't set a full lineup. I'm not advocating dropping players just to reduce your potential points. But there are some tricks. Another thing would be I have some leagues where I want to keep a full roster, but instead of keeping players on injured reserve, if I'm out of it, I'll just promote my injured reserve players to my active roster. I'm not going to start them, but there's no reason for me to add a bunch of extra filler players that I don't think have any future value. Now, certainly if I can pick a guy up off waivers, flip him for a future third or something like that, okay, that's different. But in leagues where it's essentially I'm done for and I'm okay kind of just letting things ride to the rest of the season, you want to fill your roster. You want to have everybody, completely filled in terms of your roster spots, but just promote some injured players and put them up on your active roster and just make sure you start an active lineup. So there's little tricks of the trade here where, there's subtle moves. It may only be a couple potential points. It may only be a couple points a week, but it literally could be a difference between the 103 and the 104, or the 102 or the 103. Like it could be a major tier break or a value break later on. So pick your lane, determine whether you're trying to go up or down, and do everything within the rules and within the bylaws to gear towards that. So that's the first part of this show. I just wanted to put that out there. Be thinking about it early. Don't wait until week 14 to start to do this, because you're not going to have much of an impact given you're only going to have like 1 week left in the season. Start doing it now. If you do it for 5 weeks, you may have a better shot of actually denting, some sort of benefit for you in the future. So that's something to think about regardless. So whether you're going for it or whether you're not. Now, if you're not sure whether you're going for it or you're not going for it, check some of the advanced settings. MFL especially has this. If you go to standings and you look at all the different settings in there, power rank, you can look at your advanced standings and you look at your all play record, look at your potential points, look at how many games you could have won or how many games you could have lost. I mean, look at those things and really try to determine the strength of your team. Once you already know what gets in the playoffs and what doesn't, then look at your record, look at your points, but then also look at your all play record. Also look at your potential points. Is it just because you haven't been setting good lineups? Is your efficiency low? That's another thing. Look at your efficiency. If you're down below like 80%, it means one of two things. It means one, you're not setting good lineups, meaning you're missing on a lot of players. You're picking some bad matchups, or, you're making some wrong calls on sit starts. The other thing is you may actually have an excess of players, usable players. I mean, I have some teams like this where my efficiency is down in the 70s, yet I'm setting really good lineups. I'm still scoring points. So if my efficiency is low, but my points for is high, near the top of the league, what that tells me is I have some excess that I can trade. And that's going to get into the last part of this show. This is where you really can make leverage moves in Dynasty. If you find yourself with one of these teams, okay, 9-0, 8-1, 7-2, whatever it might be, if you find yourself with one of these teams and you see maybe your efficiency is a little bit low, because if you have a really high efficiency, if your efficiency is in the 90s, it means you probably have a really thin team. You've stayed relatively healthy and you know what players to play every single week. You maybe have a rotation of like 12 to 15 players, and you're just hoping that every week you have 10 or 11 or however many starters there are in your league, you have those guys available. You don't have a lot of depth. You're not making a lot of tough calls. But if you find yourself with a team that has a ton of points, a ton of potential points, but your efficiency is down below 80%, it means you have some access. It means you have some excess and some depth. It means you can go through and actually start looking at making some true leverage moves. Even if you are 7-2, 8-1, 9-0, most teams that are 7-2 or better have a really good shot to make the playoffs. Assuming you're in a league where at least 5 teams make the playoffs, you have a pretty good shot. Now, do you want to get a bye? Yes. I mean, obviously you want to get a bye in the first round. You want to eliminate having to play a random head-to-head matchup in that first round of the playoffs. Especially, we know there are bye weeks this year in week 14, some significant players. So if you can avoid that, absolutely you want to avoid having to play in that first weekend. You want to be able to play all your games fully healthy, and you want to have all your bye weeks passed. Now, if your playoffs are in week 15 this year and they don't start till then, the bye weeks are not going to come into play. But I think the idea is you want to get that bye. That's essentially one less random and variant head-to-head game that you have to win. So obviously you don't want to jeopardize yourself getting a bye. If you're the 3rd seed right now and you're 8-1, I get it. But I think the idea and why I brought this up was if you find yourself in this situation where you have a good team, right? And you would think it's counterintuitive to shop players that are scoring points. But you can identify those players on your team where you can look and you say, okay, in 2 months, what direction is this player's value going to go? And most of the time, and obviously there are certain players that are just more valuable during the season because they're scoring points. And when we get to the offseason, we know a lot of people aren't necessarily going to want this player. If it's an older player, if it's a player that has some questions about their situation, maybe they're going to be a free agent, or maybe their quarterback might leave. There's a bunch of things that the dynasty community will say, that player's value is down when we get to March or when we get to February. So you can pretty accurately judge who those players are and aren't. But I think the idea is if you can still maintain your points, okay, your efficiency should go up if you're able to make some of these trades. These are the leverage trades. These are the trades where I'm 8-1, but I have a glut of running backs now because I just hit on an extra RB1 maybe the rest of the year in James Conner. That's a great example from this weekend. Chase Edmonds goes down. You might not even have been starting James Conner in every single week. But now if you have him, he might be your RB4 or your RB5. And all of a sudden, you're sitting on an excess. So what do I do there? The leverage move is to go to one of your contenders, maybe even the team that lost Chase Edmonds, and go, hey, you want to buy a running back. Now, most people would go, oh, I'm win now. I'm not going to trade away a running back that's a win now player. I'm not going to trade away Leonard Fournette on a team that's 8-1. That doesn't make sense. However, now that you have the extra with James Conner, even if you didn't get the James Conner side, like, right, even if you didn't have James Conner, and that's an obvious one, maybe you have extra points. You have extra players to trade. The real savvy move, and don't undersell. Don't just sell to sell, but go to your opponents. It's okay if you sell to other contenders. You know, I know Shane mentioned on Manic and Chill, he's terrified of trading a player to a contender and then losing to that player later on. And maybe it's easier for me to talk about this because I'm in 59 Dynasty leagues, okay? I'm just going to kind of let things shake out how they shake out. I'm going to lose some really tough games. I'm going to win some really close games. I'm going to win and lose probably based on every single player. So as long as I'm kind of just managing my portfolio, I'm not as worried about, I don't want to trade this player away to a contender because they might beat me later. That's not how I'm necessarily thinking about it. What I am thinking about is how sweet it is if I have a good team, I go to my fellow contenders and say, hey, I'm selling. And I think most people in your league are going to go, ooh, wow, you're selling? That's weird. You know, you have a really good team. Why are you selling? Now, you don't undersell, but you make players available. You make players available for at least market value, if not a little bit of a premium. And you can charge a premium. You can justify charging a premium and say, hey, I'm willing to sell. Part of what you're getting is you're hurting my team. You're helping your team. Here's the price. Can we agree on a price where I'm comfortable with what I get? You know, maybe I get back a first rounder for Leonard Fournette. And I sit here and go, I don't want to trade Leonard Fournette. But if I can get a first rounder for a running back that's already been given up on, that's basically on his second life in Dynasty, and who knows what his future is going to be like, I'll take the first. I'll gamble that I can make up the Leonard Fournette production somewhere else, whether that's two examples. One, I get a first for him in week 10. Maybe week 13 comes up and somebody is desperate to get picks. They just have to blow up their roster. All of a sudden, they are trading me a better player than Leonard Fournette for that first. So that's the first thing, is my first may be able to buy me more in a couple weeks if there's teams that are a little more desperate. The second thing would be, can I get production cheaper for just a short period of time? We already know there's effectively only 8 weeks left in the fantasy season. 5 of those, depending on your league settings, are regular season. The rest is playoffs. That's it. I don't have to fill a lot of gaps, especially when we get past a lot of the bye weeks. I don't have to fill a ton of gaps. Yes, there's going to be injuries. Yes, there's going to be some players that fade in and out of usability, but I only have to fill 8 more weeks. That's it. And there's going to be more opportunities over the next couple weeks to get players even cheaper. You know, maybe there is a Leonard Fournette type running back that might not be as good, you know, in one single game, but I can backfill that production for cheaper. Maybe I can buy a running back that's going to get 2 starts for a third. And I go, I'll take my chances doing that. You know, I still have a 40% chance that that player in a given week can outscore Leonard Fournette. So that's the leverage move. And if you win that deal, here's where the real leverage comes in. And I'll end the show on this point. The real leverage comes in by the fact you've traded away a player that may help one of your competitors in the short term, but you haven't really hurt your chance to still beat that team the rest of the year. You know, I'm assuming if you have low efficiency and high points, you have a pretty deep team. You have a good team. You have a high-end quality team. So by trading away some of that depth, you make a move against one of the other contenders in your league. Hopefully you acquire their first-round pick. Maybe that's a first-round pick even 2 years out. I like this even better, to acquire picks 2 years out, because it's not as much contingent on what the player I'm trading them does. So yeah, I trade them Leonard Fournette. Maybe that helps them get to the top 3 or the top 2. So I'd rather target their pick 2 years from now, where especially if it's a running back or if it's a quarterback that may not have a job for 2 years, that's where you really, really can come out ahead. What if things go bad for that team? They've now thrown away one of their few insurance policies that they're holding on their team for a short-term move. And in the current time, it looked good. But if they don't beat you this year and you're holding on to their future pick, maybe their pick 2 years out, you really have them. That's how you really use your leverage in these situations. And I think when you're a contending team that's built up a lot of depth, this is exactly the time to strike. Go to the other contenders, shop there, see if they're willing to take the chance that basically they can beat you. They can outfox you in the short term, and you're still maintaining a lot of leverage over them long term. And you're probably not hurting your overall chance of winning the championship. You can only start 10 guys. Remember the whole argument about the efficiency. If your efficiency is down below 80%, you're having to make some tough decisions. So yeah, you're taking a little bit of a risk. Your margins are a little bit thinner, but that's how you really, really can extract true leverage in your dynasty leagues. So shout out again to Clay with Dynasty Pandemic for allowing me to do those videos. I'll continue these, just whatever's on my mind. They may be 5 minutes. This one obviously was the first one, so it's going to go a little bit under 17. But at Dynasty Chill Pod, at Charles Chill FFB, and then hashtag Dynasty Leverage. Shout out to, again, Dynasty Pandemic, and I'll be back for more future videos. Be chill all.